We all probably know someone who's been affected by the wildfires on the West Coast that's been happening this past week and are still happening right now. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk to a very knowledgeable person about fires and house fires in particular, Christina Shaw of Allstate. There's nobody I trust more on this subject than Christina Shaw. Everyone just loves to be around her. And for her to be so open about her experience losing everything in her fire, her house fire, and rebuilding her life from mental health through going through all of the trials and tribulations of the insurance world and how to get reimbursed for things, like what to do right after seemingly it feels like your whole life ends, like what to do next. Christina is the one that knows. So we're excited to have her on the pod. We hope you like the episode, and we'll see you next. Hi, Christina.
Hi,
Hi.
Christina.
Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners and let them know your name, where you're from, where your agency is located, and all of that?
Well, first of all, I applaud the two of you for getting on my calendar and having this conversation because if there was ever a time, it's now. So my name is Christina Shaw. I am an insurance agency owner for the last 26 years here in New York, specifically on Long Island. And I lead a team of 11 in the agency. We manage about $14 million in premium. And we love what we do. We're like those people that wake up in the morning and we're happy to come to work most days. And again, I just applaud you for having this conversation because it's devastating what's happening.
Well, we're happy to have you specifically because we know you've kind of dealt with the same thing that a lot of homeowners in Southern California are dealing with right now. So could you tell us about
Yeah,
that story and your
sure.
experience?
So it's ironic that an insurance agent, I experienced Superstorm Sandy like many of us did that were here in New York. And I was living in Long Beach at the time and I lost that home, though not nearly as tragic as my house fire. A few years later, I had moved over to Lido Beach, which is just like the next town to Long Beach. It was a Saturday morning, and the very, very long story short, the fireplace, we had just moved in a few months prior. The fireplace, there was an ember that got caught in the wall and it was smoldering overnight. And when my husband at the time, and I say that he did not perish in the fire, we are now divorced. Like, clarify that because then people are like, oh God, that poor guy died. So he thought he was doing the right thing that morning by opening the attic door. And what it did was really just like ignite the fire. And we literally lost absolutely everything. And I mean, everything we owned. And I share that because what's happening in LA is like speaking to my heart hour by hour. And until I think you go through something like that, you can be an incredible insurance agent, right? I'm an incredible friend and a support system. But until you're in the shoes of literally losing everything, it's something I pray nobody goes through. But so then in the coming months, I had to rent a home because it took us 18 months to rebuild with the permitting process and construction. And then, so I have a lot of experience in that and like what that looks like and how to help folks stay organized that are about to go through this. The end story is I have a beautiful home. That is truly like a space where the girls and I are thriving in. So I think in every tragedy, and that's what's happening in LA, this is like a beyond tragedy. You can look back and say, like, I survived that.
Can we talk about what happened in like the minutes, hours, days after the fire? Like, what kind of things did you have to do that
Yes,
maybe you wouldn't think of when you're under so much pressure as your
yes.
house is literally no longer existent?
Yeah.
The fortunate experience where my friends and family were all able to rally and help me, whereas in California, everybody is going through it. I remember my stepdad said to my neighbor as the house was burning, she's crying. He's a funny guy. And he goes, what are you crying for? Her house is burning. It's her house that's burning. Yeah, and so,
I love that.
so I think the first thing you have to do, you have to be organized. Whether you're, and even myself, who is like a pretty highly organized, detail-oriented person, your whole world literally just burned. There's emotion, but you have to somehow rise above that and compartmentalize like the emotion and I have to rebuild a home. So I got a binder and a notebook because in the days after a fire, the amount of money, guys, you spend is nuts. And you are getting reimbursed from your insurance carrier, but that's not happening. The fire was a Saturday. I didn't get a check on a Sunday, right? I had to buy underwear, bras, food, like basic things. It wasn't like I was going out and, like, oh, let me go get some pots and pans. That was the last thing I was thinking. And all of that is going to get reimbursed. So you have to keep a very detailed log, not so much for the insurance company, but so you get reimbursed fully. And there's no way you will remember that if you do not write this somewhere. And then what will happen eventually, the insurance company is going to ask you for an inventory of your contents. So in the days right after, if you can begin to make your list, because what's going to happen is it's going to take you a few weeks. You will never remember everything that's in your home. I remember so many nights sitting in my rental and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to put the luggage in the attic on the list. Yeah. I forgot to put this. So in the days after the fire, a lot of times you could still access the property and see certain things. Like you can't use it, it's burnt, but you could see it. You want to chronicle all of that because you're getting reimbursed for that.
Right.
You want to take prior to a fire, if you can videotape your home and keep it on the cloud, because you are never going to remember. Like my daughter gave me this for Christmas. Like this is $5. So it's like maybe a poor example, but do you think I would ever remember that this was sitting on my desk? It's like a squishy stress. There's so many examples like this so if you could take a video, that would be ideal.
Well, that's an interesting example, though. How do you qualify and quantify things that have sentimental value that might not have financial?
So my ex-husband's grandma, she was so cool, Grandma Ruth. And every Sunday I would go, she would knit and I would drink Starbucks. And I would bring her a chocolate frappuccino and she'd be like, what's in here, gold? Because she couldn't believe how expensive it was. And she made me these amazing Afghan blankets. She's gone and the blankets are gone. And so if the blanket's worth $100, that's not what's important. The sentimental piece, I tell my customers, I can't do anything about it. But what I can do is financially restore your life. So we need that information. Also, you have to get housing. Now, the insurance company will help you. I had the pleasure of working with folks like you where I'm like, hey, I need a rental, and I went right into action. But again, we talked earlier, like that relationship with your insurance agent and company, when you're going to rent in the days after a fire, they're going to expect a security, your first month's rent. Like you have to either have that money in your account, which most people do not have, or the relationship with your insurance company where you're getting that money quickly. Otherwise, you'll be in a scenario where you're living with friends or family. I was very blessed to be at my mom's house for a few days, and I love my mom. We're so close, but I don't want to live with my mom. So like the first few days after the fire, it was like getting clothes, getting some toys for my kids so they felt normal, if you will. I don't like that word, but and then securing housing. And again, you're spending more money than I can tell you. So having a very, very detailed account of what you're doing.
Was there anything that you did because of your experience in the insurance industry that was like a game changer for your recovery after the fire? Like something that because you're in the industry and you know the things that people go through, thank God I did this.
Great question. I went into action. I think there's a lot of people, understandably so, that stay in devastation. And my advice would be get into action, find your housing, file your claim, get the ball rolling, and then grieve. And, you know, like even in my divorce, people were like, how did you do that so quickly? And I'm like, I had to grieve. I cried in the shower and on my way to work. And then it was a business transaction. And it's the same thing between you and your insurance company. So I think the fact that I was able to go into action, also when you have a fire, and I don't think this is happening in LA because of the magnitude, but within minutes, guys, there were public adjusters all over my block, like in Cadillacs, like driving like this with big cigars there, and the wrong person could fall victim. And I'm not saying you shouldn't hire a public adjuster. There's a space for that. Not if you work with somebody like me, because I'm going to do all that for you. But when you're in the moment, you should not be making a decision like that. And that is really, really important.
So what is working with an agency like yours, a small local agency, what does that do in a situation like this? Like, how does that help us?
I'll give you the perfect example. I had a very good client. He's also a realtor, insured with me. He had a total house fire 2 years ago. He calls me, and it turns out he's like, I'm going to hire a public adjuster. I said his name, and I said, listen, you do what you have to do, but I don't think you should do this. I am going to be your advocate between you and Allstate. But there are times people just don't have the capacity, whether it be their workload, their family load, emotionally. So again, there is a place. He hires the PA. Once a PA is assigned, I can't help you anymore. I'm out, right? There's like some laws. A few weeks later, he fires the PA, which is no easy task. And what I do is I am his advocate, because we have an amazing claims department at Allstate or the other companies I represent as well. But sometimes it's easier to get me on the phone and say, hey, Christina, I need to know when I'm getting this check and what my next steps are. Okay. And I have one person in my office that is dedicated to handling claims. And that person then will go reach out to your claim adjuster, get back to you, because the back and forth could be overwhelming. They're on the phone, you're on the phone, 3 days could go by. So I should say that's the difference between working with an 800 number and telling your story over and over and over. He just had to pick up the phone, and it was like I knew where it left off because I talked to him every day.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And also the being a friend, that's not overrated when you have a claim. Like a fender bender, that's a different story. But if all of a sudden you have a pipe burst and you have water everywhere, and your stuff is damaged, or a fire or a tree on your roof, you just need to know, like, there's a human on the other side of the phone that feels for you. There's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. I think that it's similar for when we talk about people who are making their first home purchase or selling for the first time, who maybe don't know a team that they feel comfortable with. It's like, you can pick up the phone and get any real estate agent, but you're going to be better served by working with somebody who you know, like, and trust. And I think that it's the same sort of thing when you're making huge decisions. Sometimes when you're in an emotional state, be it looking for a new home or grieving the one you may have just lost, I think you want to know the person who you're working with and know that they're on your side.
I love that you said that they're on your side, because sometimes I have to have tough conversations. Like, I have to tell people, our claims department, they're amazing, but they're overworked. So they're not always going to be like, Aaron, how are you doing? How are your kids? They're giving you the information and getting to the next. And that's maybe not what we want to hear. And I have to say sometimes, like, if you're looking for comfort from them, you're looking in the wrong place. Call me, call your therapist, call your mom. Sometimes you have to have tough conversations, but that's where knowing your client really helps.
Speaking of therapists, how did you recover emotionally from your experience, and what advice do you have for people going through this right now?
Speaking of, I said to my therapist, like, my kids seem okay. They were babies, but my older one was like around 3. And he said, a lot of kids would be regressing. They'd be wetting the bed again, but they're going to go off of what they're seeing from you. So I was strong for them, and I modeled behavior like, mom's got this. This is under control. I was still emotional, right? We would come to the house and I would let them see me sad, because I don't want to like paint Nirvana, right? But I wasn't, the times where I felt overwhelmed or I was financially scared, and I was burnt out and exhausted, I didn't let them see that because they were so young. And I think going to therapy each week and just having a place where I could just be me, recenter, regroup. And I tell a lot of people going through a major claim, it's none of my business, but if you don't have a therapist, this would maybe be a good time, because it's so overwhelming, even when you own the insurance company.
I want to talk about the kind of broader implications of what we're seeing in LA, because, you mentioned Superstorm Sandy. We see this happening in LA. We know the hurricanes just devastated parts of Tennessee and Georgia, and the west coast of Florida almost didn't exist anymore. And there's an expectation that these kinds of natural disasters are going to become more regular, more frequent, and worse. So I guess first, from an insurance industry perspective, are we going to see, insurance companies pulling out of certain states, or raising premiums, or separating fire and flood from a baseline policy? What can we expect?
So you have been seeing that, and it will get worse. So for example, in New York, we had major players in 24 pull out of the market because of the exposure. And then what happens is you have limited companies, and then they're taking rate. And it feels from a consumer that they're like taking an advantage. And I get that. But let's remember, insurance companies are for profit. And so what I think we forget is, when this kind of stuff happens, the money paid out is mind-blowing, right? So the rest of us have to reabsorb that in our rate. And I think it is going to get worse in areas like New York and Florida and California. There are states where they're not seeing rate increases like we are here. So I do think we're going to continue to see that in New York. I can't even begin to imagine what will happen in California. It was already a challenged state from an insurance perspective, much like a Florida, with availability. But this speaks to why you have to understand your insurance policy. So many people think it is a piece of paper to get to closing or to do their refi, or that the mortgage bank makes them have. But you have a property policy, and then you have your flood policy, and those are separate. Not everybody needs flood insurance, but you better understand that policy. And you better be working with somebody that is doing a review of that policy, because things change, right? Like, what you buy today may not be what you need in 10 years from now. and just understand, like, not everybody needs jewelry coverage, but a lot of people need it. Not everybody needs water backup, but you may need it. Because the folks that have good insurance in California, they will be made whole. It's going to be an uphill battle, as we know, emotionally and with time, but they will be made whole. The folks that have that bare bones policy, they could be financially devastated. So my advice is to really invest in understanding your policy and treat it like you would maybe your stock portfolio, or, I don't know, like, what would be another example? Take it seriously enough to understand it and make sure in the event of disaster, you're in a good spot.
Are there any governmental resources that people can reach out to if maybe their insurance doesn't cover everything and they still need more support?
A lot of times FEMA will come in. So in
Okay.
Sandy, FEMA came in and they do some grants, and then they do some loans. So you could apply for a grant if you are capable of filling out 888 pages over an 18-month period. Like, it's complicated. Or sometimes they will do loans at like very low interest rates. So there are programs like that. And I'm sure like the SBA, and I'm sure we'll be hearing about that in upcoming days. And I think the problem out west is so many people think, oh, it's so wealthy, but so much of the middle class and the working class lost their homes, people like you and I. And like, it doesn't make it any less that Paris Hilton lost her home. That's still devastating. But if you have six other homes, it probably does make it a little easier. But the working class and the middle class, that's where my heart is hurting.
Definitely. And I just see on social media all the time in the past week, like, people just like not really caring that these rich people lost their homes. Like, they're still people, and it's still like everything they had.
Family photos, cherished heirlooms.
It's so terrible.
It's so, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all bleed together. Do you know that same neighbor who was crying? You know what she did? She printed out, she went on my Facebook at the time, and believe it or not, I was not as active on social. I know that comes as a surprise. But she printed out all the photos I posted and put them in frames, because you want, like, when I got into my rental, I was living in somebody else's home.
Yeah.
You wanted to feel as much of home as you could. So, like, those little things, I had friends send stuffed animals to the kids. Like, that's what I hope is happening over there, besides the financial piece.
I can't help but look around the room that I'm sitting in, and 80% of what I see is sentimental value. It's the impression thing that I used when Winnie was a puppy and I have her paw print, and that could never be redone. It's signed posters that I collected when I was a kid of Broadway shows. It's a statue of a giraffe that I took from my grandmother, right? Like, things that could never be replaced.
Like your TV, your couch, your sweater. Okay, you get a new TV and couch, but like the sonogram pictures, they're gone.
This Kathy Hobbs original, could be gone.
Coffee table.
Well, I'm next to the coffee table.
I love it.
So I just kind of want to recap some of the major points that we've gone over, because we've talked about a lot of really valuable things. So I guess, what are the top 3 takeaways that you'd want whoever's been listening to us for the last half hour to kind of walk away with?
Number one, of course, after safety and getting settled and all of that, is really developing a system that's going to work for you. Like, is that going to be storing your receipts electronically or in a binder? Like, how are you going? This is a long process, and probably even longer, because, like, I'm thinking, where are all these builders coming from? So how are you going to stay organized? How are you going to communicate with your insurance company, right? Like, who is your point person? What does that process look like? Setting expectations with either the agent or the company, I think, is really important so you can manage your own stress, right? Like I like to tell somebody, I'm going to follow up with you. This process takes 7 days. I don't want you to have to think, well, when am I going to hear from her? Or maybe you think it should take 24 hours and it takes 14 days. So make sure you like really have a detailed conversation and, hey, insurance company, what are my next 5 steps that I should be prepared for? And what's the time frame on this? Because that could cause unnecessary stress for you. And then just getting settled into your new life, accepting that you are not going to be home. And that is tough. Accepting the word displaced. I remember I had a vote and they were like during Sandy and they were like, if you're displaced, wait on this line. I'm like,
Yeah.
but the acceptance of this is my new home, wherever that is, and doing your best to get back into routine, because this isn't a quick fix.
How do you think friends and family and community members can support people who are going through situations like this? Like, what do you wish that people had done for you that they didn't, or what do you think would have been more helpful than what happened?
Oh my God, I was so blessed. What I would say, if you know somebody personally, like there's all organizations, right, that you could donate to. And if anybody needs, maybe you could list them up. I have lists too, like you do, of where it's really getting to the folks that need it. But if you know somebody personally, like if you have family out there, outside of money, because again, the insurance company will make you whole. And that's a lot of times the insurance company will just advance you a lump sum. So let's say your claim payout, I'm making this number up, is $800,000, right? They'll be like, hey, here's $25,000 for the next few weeks. And that's coming out of the 800,000, but it's just to get things moving along. But outside of money, try to do things to help them feel at home. The friends that printed the photos. One friend goes, I noticed Mia always had a polar bear on her bed. I get choked up, and she bought her a polar bear and sent it to me. So there was a familiar feeling on her bed. Blankets, things for the home. Think like, what is it that you need every single day to function? And those are the items that they need, right? Like they're not thinking about like decorating their new home. It's so far from that. So if you know somebody, just like things that can make them feel settled, outside of course, money. Also gift cards. A lot of people gave me like Costco gift cards. And when I got settled in my rental, my first Costco trip, and this was like way before this inflation crisis we're in, was $1,300. I didn't buy any food. I had to buy ketchup, salt, pepper, toilet paper, like just stuff that you have in your cabinets. So the cost is just nuts. Also, every store I went to, and this is personality dependent, I would say, I lost my home to a fire. Do you have any coupons or discounts?
Yeah.
Like, let's say I was in Banana Republic buying, I still had to work, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people were like, oh, I'll give you 20% off.
Nice.
You know, again, like, I don't know that a lot of people would do that, but I was just like, I'm spending so much money. I'm going to ask.
Yeah. Ask and you shall receive.
And being
Yeah.
vulnerable sometimes is really, it's a humbling experience, but asking for help in and of itself is hard, and people can often respect people who ask for help.
Or if you have, like, so many friends gave me like old clothes, and the days after a fire, you don't have time to like shop, and it's not fun. I remember I had a big realtor convention the Thursday after the fire, and I was wearing one of Sandy's outfits, and somebody goes, oh my God, you look like Sandy today. I go, that's because I'm in Sandy's clothes. And like, I had to show up to work. And so like going out and shopping, it's not like if we meet at the Woodbury Commons for an afternoon that it's fun. So if you know somebody like personally, right? Like send them some stuff, because I was just grateful to be able to put on a sweater, even though it wasn't me. I couldn't emotionally, like, I just couldn't deal with it. So I was grateful. Whatever was on the floor, that's what I put on my body.
Christina, thank you so much for
Oh my
joining us.
God.
And thank you for sharing all of this valuable information with us and just your energy and positivity in such a really awful time. So
Waffle.
thank you for doing this. Why don't you reintroduce yourself and tell everyone where they can connect with you and where they can find you?
Sure. And if there's anybody that I could help just in a conversation that maybe doesn't have an agent, that doesn't know where to go or what to do, our agency phone number is 516-900-1234. I know it's the best number. I'm not joking. That's really our number.
That's
You
awesome.
can call us. You could text us. And we're happy to just have a conversation and just guide you. We can't be your agents. I'm not licensed in California, so I will not be selling you any products, I promise. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, you two have inspired me, I think. I want to make some videos and just some tips, right? Like staying organized and things like that. So my Instagram is I'm with Shaw, and I'll be posting there over the upcoming days. And I would be happy to keep doing this, guys, like as a ongoing series, if it helps, and even if it helps one person.
Yeah.
We'll call you after the next natural disaster.
Yeah. Yikes.
And you know it's happening.
Oh, man. Well, thanks again. We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I'm Geoff.
I'm Aaron.
We're the Aaron Geoff team at Compass, your Bronx residential real estate experts. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you